When a reality star throws a chair, a major show is canceled and tens of millions of dollars are lost. Everyone understands something significant has happened. But inside American classrooms, teachers are describing a very different experience. A chair is thrown, and life, in many ways, goes on as usual.
Desks and chairs thrown all over the room. The flag ripped from the wall.
Because the modern day teacher isn't just responsible for delivering instruction. They're expected to manage emotions, de-escalate crisis, and carry the emotional weight of a classroom.
Student punched me. My teaching assistant took the student out of the room, and the administrator not only didn't do anything, they never even came to check on me, on my assistant, or the safety of the other students.
Teaching used to require expertise. Today, it requires emotional endurance.
Student destroyed my room. All those things that I bought, the work of the other students, and I was expected to keep teaching?
Because over the years, the role of the teacher has expanded.
The job people think teachers do and the job teachers actually do are two very, very different things.
The teacher is not just an instructor, but the counselor, mediator, behavior specialist, an emotional anchor for the classroom.
People think teaching is about delivering lessons, but most of teaching is actually anticipating needs before anyone else sees them.
The question isn't whether teachers should care about students. They should. The question is, when did we expand the role of the teacher so dramatically? Because this additional work has a name: emotional labor. Other industries see the value of emotional labor. They not only recognize it, they compensate it. But in teaching, more and more, the emotional labor has been absorbed into something that is part of the job. And if you try to push back, you're not bringing up a different idea. You're labeled as a bad teacher who doesn't really care about the kids. Because if the system had to recognize emotional labor, they would have to compensate you for it. And that's something they're not willing to do. Emotional labor is real and playing out in today's classrooms. Teachers across the nation are speaking out about their experiences dealing with the conditions that require high amounts of emotional labor.
You could not pay me $1 million to go back and work in public education. What do you mean I got Chromebooks thrown at my head? What do you mean I had to evacuate my classroom multiple times a week and teach an ELA lesson in the hallway because one kid was destroying my entire room? What do you mean one of my students ripped a radiator off of a wall in a fit of rage?
It's not normal to go to work and get beat up. This child had a lot of documented behavior problems. He ended up eloping, and in regular language that means ran out of the classroom and proceeded to run off campus. When I did find him, let's just say it didn't go well, and I definitely had some bruises.
A student told me to F off, told me I was told me to shut up. I've dealt with some tough behavior before, but I've never been spoken to quite like that. And so I rang the office and the principal comes over and gets the student out of class. So 10-15 minutes later, this child is back in my class with a lollipop.
The hardest part of teaching isn't the lesson, it's everything surrounding it.
Going to a job where every day I'm yelled at by kids. I'm evaluated on my ability to teach when all I'm doing is managing behaviors and I'm teaching probably 10% of the time.
I remembered a student who screamed at a teacher, cursed at her, called her names that you would not hear in the worst movies. He attacked her weight, her looks, even threw in some racial slurs.
Had a fourth grader slap me in the face on the first day of school. Had a kindergartner who barely spoke any English, who had an iPad in a case, so she lassoed and she almost hit someone in the head. I came around and blocked it. Otherwise, concussion, brain damage, who knows?
Yes, these are some more extreme examples, but these aren't isolated experiences. The data confirms what teachers have been saying for years. A 2024 Pew Research Center survey found that 68% of teachers reported experiencing verbal abuse from a student. A nationwide NEA survey found that 4 out of 5 educators identified student behavior as a serious problem in their school. This is not a story about a few difficult classrooms. This is a nationwide pattern, and it's getting harder to ignore. For generations, the expectation for teachers was clear. Teachers were required to focus their efforts on students learning the material of the class. To accomplish this task, teachers focused on lesson planning, assessments, and of course, the actual delivery of instruction. Classroom management was always a part of teaching. Being prepared to explain classroom expectations and reinforce them was an essential part of teaching, but it was with the assumption that certain student behaviors would be outsourced to the principal's office. But today, that is not the case. Teachers are being told that more and more is to be handled in the classroom. The modern teacher is now expected to recognize signs of trauma, to manage escalating behavior, build emotional regulation skills, resolve conflicts, and maintain a safe environment for students, all while still holding to the academic standards they were hired to teach. The work of managing emotions, absorbing crisis, and holding a room together may seem invisible, but it is actually labor. It's what sociologist Arlie Russell Hochschild classified as emotional labor. In her book, The Managed Heart, Hochschild defined it as work that requires one to induce or suppress feelings in order to sustain the outward continence that produces the proper state of mind in others. It's the calm response when a student is emotionally escalated and continuing on as if nothing has happened. It's finding a calm voice when a student again interrupts and continuing with the lesson. This teacher says it well.
We teachers are asked to do something impossible in moments like this. We're supposed to keep our voices calm when we are in full panic mode, but we have to, because the rest of the class will follow what we do.
Emotional labor is the work of managing your feelings so other people can feel a certain way. In her book, Emotional Labor, Rose Hackman says it clearly. Emotional labor, just like physical labor, intellectual labor, and creative labor, is a form of work that does require time, effort, and skill. And teachers are being asked to supply more of this emotional labor with each passing year. With every PBIS, social emotional learning, and restorative justice initiative, more emotional labor is being extracted from them. While at the same time, their academic responsibilities aren't being lessened, nor is their compensation being increased. Emotional labor is real, just as real as other work. So this brings up a bigger question. What keeps emotional labor from being acknowledged in the workplace? And who profits from keeping it invisible? As she walks into the school cafeteria, Sharon can see the materials for the staff meetings spread out on the table. Post-it notes, highlighters, and pencils, all out for teachers to use for some kind of professional development. Administrators step in front of the staff, PowerPoint framing them as they begin to wave their hands in excitement. They have just come back from a new training, and the school will be implementing a new plan for behavior. Instead of sending students to the office when there is a behavior issue, teachers will have a restorative conversation with the student. There are clipboards teachers can take back to their class that have questions that can be useful to ask. The administrators explain that students today come to school with all kinds of trauma, and we can't increase it by sending them out of the classroom. Plus, then those students that are misbehaving aren't in the classroom to learn. Teachers pipe up with questions about logistics. Who is going to watch the rest of the class while you're having these conversations? Well, you can just call the office and we'll send someone to watch your class. Sharon tries not to roll her eyes. The last time she called the office, she heard back 3 days later. Or, the administrator continues, you can do it during your prep period. You can find the student and pull them out of class so you can build a relationship and have a solid conversation. Sharon's eyes widen. Her prep period is already stretched thin. She is lucky to not have to stay after or come early to get all the lesson planning and grading done in the contract hours. And now they want her to use her time she should be using to plan lessons to incorporate this new initiative without any extra pay or time allotted for it. And of course, the administrator chimes in. We want all these conversations documented in these organized spreadsheets. You can find them on your Google Drive. Sharon wants to ask if they would be getting an additional prep period put into their day to accommodate for the additional work this would require. But she keeps these thoughts to herself. Because if she pushes back by acknowledging the additional emotional labor, she knows people will judge her and tell her that if she really cared, she would do it for the kids. A brilliant strategy to extract more work without additional compensation or support. Because when you take labor that is genuinely meaningful and name it a calling, people feel guilty for having any level of boundaries. Because now doing this work is too important to reduce to something as crude as money. The messaging is that real teachers don't do it for the paycheck. That the real reward is seeing a student learn something and making a difference in a kid's life. And though these are joys that teachers find, they should be in no way mistaken for compensation or support for additional work. A plumber can find joy in a client's gratitude. A doctor can find a sense of contentment in the happiness he brings to his patients. But that doesn't mean they don't expect compensation or stipulations for additional work. And this distinction is important. Because the moment the work becomes a calling, the emotional labor now becomes invisible and part of the job, no matter how large that part keeps getting. And yes, most teachers find some level of joy in what they do, or they wouldn't have chosen the profession. But the narrative of teaching being a calling is a dangerous one. Dr. Travis Schachtner, author of Employment Ethics, clarified this on the podcast.
And you'll take the low wages because you're doing your calling. You'll take a second job and a third job because I'm doing what I wanted to do when I was young. You know, that's a hard one to overcome, but it's an easy one for most employers to abuse.
Because now the work has been described as an expression of who you are, rather than a demand being made of you. And how can you have compensation for something that has been placed out of the economic system altogether? The calling narrative probably came from a good place. But today, it is being used as a financial instrument to keep teachers from asking for more. Whether that's pay or support, teachers are meant to feel guilty for pointing out their additional emotional labor, because the calling makes it so they should do whatever it takes. But let's say what that really is. Whether intentional or not, it's exploitative, because work is work. And teachers didn't sign a pledge to a calling like a nun or a priest. They're human beings wanting to do good, fair work in the world. Teachers deserve to have their emotional labor recognized and compensated, like many other professions in the world. A therapist is paid by the hour to manage emotions, as well as time between clients to decompress and research better ways to support. A divorce mediator is also paid to manage conflict resolution. A hostage negotiator gets paid for working through someone's release. A teacher is now being asked to use skills like these simultaneously for 30 children. And the pay and support hasn't significantly increased with the increasing needs schools are asking them to now solve. Over time, educational institutions have come to depend on this emotional labor more and more. And instead of recognizing it, they lean more into the idea of calling or the work being part of being a teacher, rather than what it is, additional labor. Hackman calls this extractive emotional capitalism. She explains it as a system that benefits from emotional labor without accounting the value or cost to the people performing it. The program that Sharon's administrators are rolling out requires additional labor, but they're not recognizing it. They are not changing the academic standard to accommodate time for these new strategies. They are not giving Sharon an additional prep period to fully commit to this program. They aren't hiring the additional staff that this program would need. They aren't changing her class sizes to a manageable number to do this strategy correctly. The program probably comes from a good place. This idea isn't a bad one. Having more conversations with students and being able to build relationships does work, but the system isn't supporting it. You have to have the appropriate conditions for this to flourish. And adding it on without the proper support and compensation for the emotional labor involved is irresponsible. So the real question is, what do we do about it? The first step is to acknowledge that emotional labor exists. We can't ask for support or compensation for something that is currently invisible. Vocabulary is power, and the vocabulary of emotional labor is one every teacher needs to have at the top of our minds. Only by naming it can we begin to see it.
There's really tricky behavior in the classroom, and it kind of all ends up on the teacher. And I just think something needs to change.
When discussing the future of emotional labor, Hackman says it clearly. We need a new and human way to value emotional labor that is honest and transparent. We need our workplaces to acknowledge and contend with the significance emotional labor plays in the bottom line. We must recognize, accurately compensate, and elevate emotional labor, expecting it on all levels of the hierarchy. One of the hardest things about emotional labor is that it is those institutions that rely on it the most that are sometimes the most blind to it. Hochschild writes, ironically, cultures which require the most emotional labor and may be home to its most highly trained practitioners may also be those that inhibit the very recognition of it. That's why recognizing it is even more essential in a career like teaching. All teachers need to see emotional labor as significant, but it's especially important if you've been in the profession for a while, because it's easy to not notice when you've been doing additional emotional labor for so long, you forget what it actually looks like. The second, emotional labor would be much harder to extract if teachers let go of the calling mentality. If you individually see it as a calling, more power to you. But we need to accept that many teachers see it as a job. Yes, a job they find joy or passion for, but at the end of the day, day, it is a job. And that doesn't make them a bad teacher. In fact, I think it makes them an even better teacher. Because teaching, like any job, can be part of a whole plethora of things that make someone's identity. And it's healthy to show students that the adults working with them are whole people with full built identities, which also includes being a teacher. Also, the next time someone raises their hand in a staff meeting and asks what compensation will be given for the emotional labor, don't go along with the calling narrative they want, that you're better than that teacher because you're about the kids and they don't care like you do. Instead, support it, because there's no competition on who cares more for the job. And there's nothing noble about being exploited.
I think it's interesting that we call teachers lazy, or we tell them that they don't care about the kids when they protect their boundaries or expect compensation for their labor, but then in the same breath can't understand why we have a massive teacher shortage.
It is only by getting proper compensation and support that we will keep the best teachers in the profession in the long run.
There's a mass teacher exodus right now, and I'm afraid that people think it's trimming the fat off of education, and they're getting rid of the bad teachers and the ones that don't like their job. I'd like to argue it's probably the opposite. It's probably the teachers that care so much about their kids and about this job that they're getting nothing out of this, and it's time to go.
Lastly, we need to be using the words emotional labor in bargaining agreements. When districts are thinking about implementing new policies and strategies, they need to put a number on the emotional labor it would require. A new strategy might look great on paper, but start running the numbers of how much extra FTE it would actually require, and the conversations might change. The real question is, can a district really afford this? Can they reduce class sizes to make this actually happen? Can they add an additional prep period to every teacher to accommodate for the additional emotional labor? Can they add the appropriate amount of additional support staff to actually make this strategy work? Because teachers aren't just leaving teaching because of the money. They're leaving because their emotional labor isn't part of the conversations, especially the most important conversations bargaining their contract. Teachers need to have their emotional labor recognized as real work, because that's exactly what it is.
If we want great teachers for our students, then we need to treat teachers like professionals. And that means giving them adequate time and support and compensation to do their jobs, not expecting them to martyr themselves, because that's how we've always done it.
Teachers shouldn't be leaving the profession burnt out because they have maxed out their emotional endurance by the extraction of their emotional labor.
I left education because I was dealing with these same extreme behavior issues. I had no support from my admin team.
I truly believe the words emotional labor need to go viral in the educator community, because the more we talk about it, the more we are able to label emotional labor for what it really is. Emotional labor is real work. It may not produce a spreadsheet or a grade card, but it is a real part of teaching that is being increased more and more each year. And by acknowledging emotional labor, it forces the ones making the decisions to quantify something that they are now mining for free. I'll leave you with this. Throwing a chair costs a TV show tens of millions of dollars. Throwing a chair in a classroom costs teachers something too. We just haven't stopped to add it up. Thanks for watching Educator University. I'm Annie, and if you liked this video, I know you're gonna like this one.